necessarily tribal or regional.
All right, thank you for staying with us on Daybreak this morning. It's now time for the newspaper review, and we'll be taking a few stories from the headlines on the national dailies this morning. We'll begin with Daily Trust newspaper, and we have the lead story here that talks about high fertilizer prices threaten wet season farming. Writers here says 50 kilogram costs 30,000 naira or more. High costs may cause food inflation. Federal government, states must act now, say stakeholders. You can find details of that story on page 4. And below that story is a pictorial of people gathering with the pictures of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli custody during a rally in solidarity with them in the city of Nablus in the occupied West Bank in Nablus, Palestinian territories yesterday. We also have more stories at the top of the page. 40 days to go. Buhari's government approves 1.535 trillion naira for 11 road projects. Banditry, 308 killed, 746 kidnapped in Kaduna in 3 months, says report. We have more stories here. Tinubu asks police to probe Adamawa election controversy. We have more stories here. Death toll hits 151 as Lassa fever spreads to 26 states. 3,298 inmates on death row, says Correctional Service. On page 5, Buhari returns from Saudi Arabia as Sudan crisis forces flight rerouting. And these are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
And we move on now to the Nigeria News Direct, and it has there as the major story, controversial Adamawa poll. Tinubu demands investigation. Our intervention is needless, federal government insists 2023 general election best ever, says election matters INEC's duty to handle. That's on page 21. And to other stories, Lagos state government ready to partner with investors, discourse for sustainable power. That's coming from Sanwo-Olu. And Opportunity Fair, the National Content Development and Management Board to boost local content investments and capacity building. And right there above the name mark, Seplat Energy drives capacity building through teachers' empowerment. Unlimited joy for Glow dealers as telco splashes houses, cars. Another gift, you find that actually corroborated by the front page picture. And finally, we have Dangote Cement Ibeshi empowers farmers to boost food production. These are the major stories on the front page of the Nigeria News Direct.
All right, let's take a look at Blueprint newspaper. From the top of the page, the e-customs project. Despite court order, FEC OK's fresh memo. We also have riders that says El Rufai to federal government and May 29. Intensify security operations for peaceful transition. And riders here says once criminal outlaws can exploit 39 days gap, 1,266 residents killed, 4,973 kidnapped in 15 months in Kaduna, 16 killed in Zamfara, 8 rescued in Benue. Lagos prays for Tinubu's smooth handover. Details can be found on page 6 of Blueprint newspaper. We also have more stories. Eid al-Fitr, federal government declares Friday and Monday public holidays. Ex-Blueprint defense correspondent Ndache authors 3 books on counterinsurgency. We also have Nigeria's currency in circulation hits 1.6 trillion naira in March. And on the footnotes there, we have convene NEC meeting in 7 days of face court action. Lukman tells Adamu, and that is on APC. We also have more NNPCL. Buhari canvasses due process on Ararume, federal government mulls appeal. RMRDC, reducing importation of web offset link. And Adamawa, Tinubu 6 police wreck probe congratulates Fintiri others. And these are some of the stories on Blueprint newspaper.
And to the Punch newspaper, We'll take stories that have not been highlighted by other papers. Insecurity, local rice price jumps by 200%. Rice price soars from 173 per kg to 521 per kg under Buhari despite government intervention. And this is coming from an NBS, or the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics report. Rice farmers, producers, experts blame rising inflation, insecurity, and others for rice woes. You'll find two other stories. Lagos mobs burns BRT bus as driver dies it crash. You see the BRT bus right there, I think, on a bridge, if you like. You want the details of what led to that burn, please pick up today's Punch. And to other stories, El-Rufai raises the alarm over insecurity ahead of May 29th. Ogun father chains stabs 2 children to death. What a carnage. And substandard materials quacks caused Banana Island building collapse, according to report. And the Federal Account Allocation Committee allocation committee drops as FG states share 715 billion. And Buhari returns, avoids Sudan airspace. These are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
Okay, let's see what the Nation is saying this morning. The lead story here says why Buhari didn't intervene in Adamawa poll crisis by government. Tinubu seeks probe of debacle. NSCDC commandant summoned. We also have Kaduna. We already took that story. We also have 172 Nigerians troop Guinea-Bissau. At the top of the page there, Iwanyao is Ohanese president. And we also have acting LP chair, reject suspension by party NEC. And Buhari to appeal judgment voiding Ararome's removal. GMO here says Nigeria not defaulting in China debt repayments. And these are some of the stories on the Nation.
And moving on to the niche newspaper now, the Business Day this morning. Very interesting dimension to the front page this morning. Jollof, in other words, jollof rice costs soared to 7-year high under Buhari. Interesting perspective to that story. Nigeria didn't default in Chinese debt repayment, and this is coming from the Debt Management Office. Malaria overdiagnosis leaves deadlier diseases unchecked. And importers count losses as vendors thrive at Tinkham ports. This has become a recurring decimal in our port stories. These are the major stories on the front page of the Business Day.
All right, let's take a look at some of these particular stories. And right here, we also have our guest on, in the studio with us here. He's Nasir Lowell. He's a constant, and he's actually joining us here to analyze some of these stories this morning. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Nasir.
morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Hussein is struggling to give you maybe a fresh title, but Nasir is still the editor-in-chief. Deadline newspaper. It's a pleasure to have you join us as always.
Thank you very much.
Interesting dimension to front pages this morning. The Daily Trust is reporting the high cost of fertilizer and how that can feed, is going to affect wet season farming and could worsen food inflation, which is one thing we have suffered over the last 2 years. And the NBS, incidentally, is also coming out with statistics that is now showing us how it has become very expensive to prepare a pot of jollof rice, if you like, something that is a constant in almost every home. What sense do you make of this report?
Well, to start with, it's quite unfortunate that we are still talking about only wet season farming in Nigeria. Most of our farmers cannot engage in dry season farming, and for no fault of theirs, because the government has not been able to make all the necessary, make provision, for it to happen. And if you look at the number of companies in Nigeria that are actually into production of fertilizer, we have quite a number, but still we're not talking about our capacity to even meet the demands. We are talking about the inability of our farmers to be able to even purchase this fertilizer from the companies. And this is a government that is already talking about, some subsidy, in the procurement of fertilizer. But somehow, all the money, all the intervention of the government is actually going to the middlemen, people that have no business, with farming activities in any way, because maybe they see it as an opportunity to pay back some of their supporters, those who supported them during their campaign and what have you. So instead of helping the farmers directly, they end up sending all this intervention to people that have no business, with farming activities as far as we are concerned. So we should worry for the fact that we are talking about food. It's something that people can actually not do without. If you are talking about some luxurious, some luxury, you can say people can forgo one or two, but you are talking about food, and people have to survive. So we really have to find a way of, going around all these bottlenecks. And for the government, they should also try and see to it that farmers engage in farming not only during the wet season farming, because that's like relying on nature only. When you can, create dams, you can do so many things with that's with irrigation, which at the moment, very few states are actually have the capacity to do that.
When you actually talked about, interventions and the bottlenecks, I seem to remember a time where there were lots of interventions for farmers, and not just even the high cost right now. We're seeing lots of terrorism in some of these farming communities. We're seeing, flooding that just, finished, and then it's actually looming, another, flooding season is actually looming again. So I don't know, how can these farmers, and a lot of farmers have actually given up, whether they like it or not. Talking about inflation, there's hunger everywhere, prices of food has actually gone up. So how can we, we talked about how to cushion the effect already, but how can we let these farmers know that, know not to give up on farming? Because if you've tried and tried and tried, of course,
well,
at
honestly,
some point.
it's very difficult to sometimes to hold on. Nobody wants to spend 100 naira, and then in the end, what you will be able to get is maybe 70 naira. That's like losing, 30 naira of your own hard-earned money. So honestly, unless the government, does its own part of the bargain, I don't see how farmers will be able to weather the storm, so to say, because they are not in it for charity. They want to make money, in as much as they also want to have something to spend on their own. But then, like I said, it's the government's responsibility to do that. Like you said, right now so many farmers cannot even go to the farms because of insecurity. You go to the farm today, and before you know it,
You've been kidnapped or something.
Yeah, you are abducted, and then instead of your inputs becoming the issue, at transaction being transacted upon, you are now the one, that some criminals will be putting some money, saying that they have to pay this before they will let you out and things like that. So the farmers have been trying on their own. It's now left to the government actually, to make sure that people can actually engage in farming, and then they also have access to all the inputs that they require. Because, like I said earlier, they are not in it just to make sure people eat. They also want to make money. If it is for them to maybe engage in charity, probably they will do other things other than farming.
Absolutely. You've talked about providing security for farmers, and some of the papers also capture this. Kaduna has come into focus again. The Daily Trust, for instance, is reporting that over 308 have been killed in the last 3 months, and over 700 kidnapped in Kaduna. And in another paper, I think we saw the governor raising alarm ahead of the inauguration that insecurity is becoming a concern again. Why is it difficult for us to, this is coming despite what appears like a sustained engagement by the Nigerian military forces What else do we need to do? Have we come to the point where we would require some kind of external support? Does it appear that we are pretending to be the big brothers who can take care of their problem and we are suffocating in it? Or is it, I mean, we provided assistance everywhere we were asked to, even in the face of our own internal crisis. Why is it difficult for us to ask for some kind of help to nip this in the bud?
Well, I think for the sake of context, the governor actually spoke, during the presentation of the 2022 report by the state's Ministry of Internal Affairs and Internal Security and Home Affairs, I think.
Headed by Aaron, yeah.
Yes, which is headed by Samuel Aaron. So that was where he made the comment. But security issue is not something that we should be paying attention to just because we are, approaching a transition period. Security is something that we should engage in. Our security forces should remain alert. 247, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. 300. And so it's something that we just have to do it continuously. It's not something that we should relax. And then maybe because we are approaching a transition period, we should now maybe decide to up the ante. I think the government, should make sure all those who may want to cause trouble, not just during the transition, even today, even tomorrow, they are not given the opportunity to do that. Sometimes, they may succeed in one or two ways, but the way the government will now respond will now show us that, yes, the government has always been, at alert and alive to its responsibility. But to say, to raise alarm, simply because we are heading towards a transition period, honestly, I don't think it will help the system in the long run. Because like I said, security is something that we just have to, do continuously without having a day off.
All right, so let's quickly take a look at City and Crime page, pages 16 and 17 on Daily Trust newspaper. Really interesting stories here. We have attention as gunmen kidnap driver at Nasarawa Deputy Governor's office. We have 2 killed, 5 injured as car crashes pedestrian somersault in Anambra. We have 2 killed, 4 injured as perimeter fence collapses in Abuja. This happened yesterday in Wuse. A man arrested for attempting to kidnap girl in Kano. We have kidnappers informant commit suicide in Abuja suburb. We also have 2 arrested for beating colleague to death over hemp in Kwara State. Kano man remanded for stealing bread. We have 2 remanded for stealing pots in Kwara. And female circumcision attracts 4-year jail term. And the final one here, father tortures 2 children to death in Ogun State. He actually chained and locked them for 3 months without food.
Well, quite interesting stories there, but unfortunately, if the newspapers should pay attention to only, stories that have to do with crime, we may end up with no space for business, no space for comments, for agriculture. So it's like a wake-up call to all the security agencies, the fact that things like this continue to happen. We're not saying that they are not doing anything. Probably that's why we even have less, maybe the numbers will have been much higher. But, this is something that, we see the results, not just the effort. It's good that you are making the effort, but it's only the results that we get to see at the end of the day. If, despite your presence on the streets, we continue to have, criminals, having a field day in so many places, then nobody will give you any, maybe kudos, for the job that you are doing. But if you are able to, make it very difficult for all these things to happen, then of course Nigerians, being who they are, Nigerians, we have to give it to them. Once they see efforts, they appreciate. But when you do nothing, then you don't expect them to be clapping for you when there is no basis for doing that.
Yeah. Interesting development also yesterday. We saw Governor Fintri picks up his certificate of return. Personally, when I was looking at him, I was wondering why he spotted black like Hussein. Like it felt more like a mourning. Then in the celebration, he was moody. And at that event, he also called that they allow him probe the incidents. Well, he felt like wanting to take his own pound of flesh. But what was instructive from everything that happened yesterday was, on the one hand, Tinubu was asking the police to probe what had happened in Adamawa. On the other, the government is saying they had no business with what happened in Adamawa, that elections and whatever happens with it is supposed to be fixed by INEC. But INEC is not law enforcement agency. We saw government agency, people who superintend the local unit of the law enforcement agency take active participation in what was a bizarre outcome. And isn't it surprising that the federal government is pretending not to have a responsibility to, because those could have led to a complete breakdown of law and order?
Well, maybe because some people actually accused the government of being behind, what actually transpired. So maybe they think it's better they allow all that's relevant, to be able to do that. And you can see even the, I think the NSCDC, the CG, summoned the state commandant, in Adamawa. And it's over the same issue. And you also had Finteri, talking about the fact that the police and a number of security agencies actually played a role, in what transpired. And for us to allow him to take care of it, like you said, he may also want to abuse the process, because this is something that has to do with you directly.
That's right.
And if you take charge of the prosecution, maybe you may go beyond what you are supposed to do. So I think the government, should be interested in what happens after this. Like the president-elect said, this is something that we should not only investigate, but all those who are found wanting, in one way or the other, they should be prosecuted, because this is something that we are talking about, our democracy. If this goes without, any sanction, then be sure that next election, so many people may try this, or even much more than this. So already I saw some people already saying Finteri is a veteran, when it comes to inconclusive election, because this is not the first time he's facing inconclusive election. And then they said he's also not a stranger, to all these schemings and what have you, that he did probably the same thing during the time of Governor Inyako and what have you. But we're talking about a system in Nigeria. Simply because someone was found wanting in the past does not mean we should not try to correct all the faults, so that we don't get to see a recurrence in the future.
Okay, now let's talk about, a story on Daily Trust and also on Guardian. On Guardian, it actually says 40 days to go, FEC approves over 100 billion naira contracts. But on Daily Trust, it says Buhari's government approves 1.535 trillion naira for 11 road projects. Just 40 days to go.
Well, they will say that the government is a continuum. They have like a 4-year mandate, and that mandate will end on the 29th of May. So maybe using that argument, they will say that they still have a responsibility to the state, and that's what they are doing. But we're talking about contracts.
Continuity again.
And we're talking about contracts. So many people will now say maybe it's an opportunity to get some people rich before the end of the tenure. Maybe those who you were not able to help, in the course of the 4-year term. Now you are trying to find a way of repaying them. But sometimes, just because people will talk should not stop government from playing its role. But the government should also worry about, some of the things that, the meanings that people can read into some of its actions. Because if you are talking about 1.5 trillion, then that means around 100 plus, per because we are talking about 11 roads, and 11 roads gulping that amount of money. I know some will say maybe there are bridges to be constructed, there are maybe right-of-ways, relocations, compensations, and what have you. But sometimes it's always better, to avoid all this unnecessary controversy, so that right or wrongly, maybe people don't get to accuse you, of things that maybe you don't even
Interesting. I recall a conversation with Nasser El-Rufai where questions were being asked about the 72 hours contract he signed off as Minister of FCT. He said, well, I was still Minister of FCT and I had the power to do whatever at that time. And they said the one you gave to your wife, and his response was, she was a citizen of Nigeria, qualified by every right to have asked. She qualifies and I'm supposed to sign off. Well, so be it. We have this other very troubling story from deaths arising from Lassa fever, 151 so far, and spreading to about 26 states. Each time you hear of things like this, you think that in 2023, I mean, we shouldn't be losing so much human life to this kind of incidents. Is it a function of awareness, or people are just stuck in their old ways of doing things?
I think it has to do with awareness, because we are talking about simple hygiene. Because how do you get Lassa fever is by maybe coming into contact, with the feces of rats and some rodents. So if you take your hygiene seriously, you may be able to avoid things like this. But because there is no enough awareness, people don't even know. You can see most of the victims of Lassa fever actually are those who are treating, patients. Sometimes the medical personalities are the ones that are affected, because when people come to the hospital, they will not tell you that this is what has happened.
That's if they even know themselves.
Yeah, so before you know it, you have like interface with it, and then you end up, and it's something that is very difficult to actually treat. So because of that, we are like endangering the lives of our health, medical officers when we need their services very much. So if we can increase the awareness, probably we will be able to, even if we don't eradicate it completely, at least we will be able to reduce the number of fatalities that we see every day.
Well, just before you go, let's have your thoughts on the Correctional Service saying 3,298 inmates are on death row at the moment.
Well, because our state governors, they hold the ace when it comes to execution, signing of the execution of all these condemned criminals, as they call them. But for political reasons, for other reasons that they are not actually telling us, people are still there. And sometimes, personally, I don't know what others may think, but if you deprive people of their lives, honestly, I don't think you should be allowed to retain yours. So if you have gone through the process, and then we are sure, that you have been convicted beyond reasonable doubts, nothing should stop us from, sending you to the afterlife.
This is the reason why a lot of people seem to think repentant Boko Haram, former Boko Haram members should not be allowed to, go back into the society and to be made to face, what they did while they were still part of the Boko
I also
Haram.
believe that, because, especially even if we are to do that, we shouldn't be doing it, now that the war is still on. We can still see those that are responsible for the killing of, our loved ones and what have you. How will you feel, somebody that you are accusing of maybe killing your loved one, walking about freely?
The risks of playing the devil's advocate, Hussein. Some others say the governors don't want to sign off on it so that they don't create a precedence for themselves, it appears. Well, that would be a case for another day. We have to prove that they are equally as guilty, so that somebody doesn't say, well, you signed off on the deaths of some criminals, now you're here, let us hasten your transition to the afterlife. It's been a wonderful conversation. with Malin Nasser. Hussein, was tempted to make him a third presenter.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
it's not such a bad idea.
Yes, it's not. It's not. It's the, or the number of times we have had to hijack him to play that role. Anyways, we want to thank you very much for always showing up whenever we come calling and for providing those insightful perspectives to some of the issues that made the front pages. As somebody who makes front pages himself, thank you once again.
Thank you for
by the time we see you next, the Ramadan would have been over, and maybe you would have added a bit of flesh from that time. And so ahead of that time, we want to say Barakah Salah in advance.
Thank you very much.
That's how much we can bring you from the newspaper pages this morning. We'll take a quick breather. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Please stay with us.
Where you find that look at this. Not necessarily tribal or regional.